Hello, friends. This is Tammy here. How are you? Live with Henry Ball. Welcome to week 2 Q&A with Tammy and Henry. We're excited to be with y'all. We're going to give a few of you a little more time to get on. I see 3 sets of eyeballs. We want to see a lot more. But as you are jumping on, come over here to the comments and post your question. So I want you to post your question for me. That way we know what you want to ask. Okay, give me your questions right there. Post it in the comment. And don't say, when is he getting out? Don't say, when is the judge going to decide? Because none of us know. I got an interesting call today, and Henry's like, tell me. Go ahead, Henry.
Well, if that's what we're going to start with, we had one of those moments today when I was like, what do I not know? Because my niece asked the question in the group, like, I just want to know when a decision is going to be made, or I just want to know if a decision has been made. And Tammy was saying, yeah, I want to know that too. But instead of saying, yes, I want to know that too, she just said yes, which is yes, a decision has been made. And then my phone started blowing up. Like, what's the decision? I'm like, what?
He calls me. He's like, can you fix that?
So yeah, we don't know when the judge is going to rule. I will say that I believe it's going to be sooner than later. If you think about it, it's really only been in the judge's hands for a little bit less than 2 weeks now. So it really wouldn't be, it would be quick for a judge to rule in just 2 weeks. So
especially on someone's.
Something like this. And keep this in mind, for many of you who've been following the Michael Chappell is Innocent Project, and certainly folks that have been, here for a very long time, and from the beginning, the petition was filed in March of 2022 or 2023. I'm sorry, March of 2023. So it has been 40 months that this petition has been pending. So yes, it's been a long time for all of us, and it's been a long time coming. Certainly hasn't been any longer for anybody than it has been for Mike Chappell,
right.
As he's been dealing with this nightmare for 33 years. But I do believe that we are, at the finish line, and we are waiting to hear from the judge any day. I will say that we have our official Peach Court document watcher, Mr. Corey Scott, and he's keeping an eye on Peach Court every day. I would assume Billy will notify me as soon as he knows anything, but we also are watching Peach Court to see if anything new gets filed. And he checked Peach Court. I think he sent me a message at 6:37 that he checked it one final time today to make sure there was nothing, late that got posted. And so as of 6:37, there's no news, nothing new. And so we're still in the same holding pattern, waiting for the judge. And I do believe it will be soon.
So that was our big question of the day. And we actually have a first question from our viewers. Why did Miss Thompson go to the American Inn on the night she was killed?
Well, that's a very good question. And it's one of those things that, this case, I think everybody was kind of shocked a little bit. Their eyes, kind of opened up a little bit when that information was even brought out, that there was information or evidence that she had been at the American Inn that night. The first time I saw it in Jack Burnett's notes, it just kind of was like, huh? Because, we have the whole timeline. We know, as the state said, that she left her house, just after 9:30 to go to work. Actually, I think they said it about 10 minutes to 10 is when she left to go to work. And we have the testimony of Amy Parker. I shouldn't say testimony, the statement of Amy Parker and her boyfriend at the time, saying that Imogene Thompson left about 10 minutes to 10 from her residence. So all this time, the question has been, why did Miss Thompson go to the muffler shop? Of course, that's the story from the question of the day, that the three friends said that, you know, Michael Chappell had called and lured her to the muffler shop. Although there really was no evidence of that. There were no phone records. There was no phone call that took place between Michael Chappell and Miss Thompson. And if you look at the testimony closely of the three friends, they really didn't say that Michael Chappell called. They said they were expecting Michael Chappell to call. You know, I'm expecting Donald Trump to call me and let me know that he's going to give me, you know, some of his fortune. It might not happen, but I'm expecting it. I'm expecting that call any day. And so, you know, it really just, you know, it really never made sense. And then there's this new information that she's at the American Inn. And so I'll tell you a little bit about that. And the first time I read it, it kind of just didn't make sense, you know, and it's one of those things that's in the back of your mind, like, what would she have been doing there? There was some information on those notes, though, about other people that were there. And we actually did contact, well, two of those people that are on those notes. And one of them corroborates certain aspects of Tuki's story kind of unbelievably. Like, you know, Tuki, one of the probably craziest things Tuki says that people have a hard time understanding is that he followed JP Morgan when he left the hotel. Like, why would you follow the police? Like, we're normal, reasonable people. Like, none of us, you know, are going around following the police. And when we hear that, you know, from a drug dealer back in the 90s, we think, oh yeah, sure, right. But part of her statement is that she saw the small car and she identified it further to family members that the young black guy was driving the car that followed the police out of the American Inn. And it's like, okay, well, that's interesting information. And there is another interesting note on Jack Burnett's notebook. It gives the room number that she was in at the American Inn. And so after I had started communicating with Tuki and he's telling me this wild story about what he saw that night, and she was at the hotel, and I'm still trying to piece all this together. And at that particular time, I was actually kind of trying to find more information about her purse. And I said, oh, well, if you saw her that night, you should be able to describe her purse. And he said, well, the purse was kind of under her arm. I couldn't really see it, but when they were helping her get into the police car, they were holding her umbrella. Actually, he said umbrella. They were holding her umbrella. And I'm like, oh, well, what color was her umbrella? And it took him a second. He said, I'm not real sure at first. And then he said, I think it was brown. Well, I have a picture of the brown umbrella laying on her floorboard that was in the autopsy photos that nobody outside of law enforcement and a few people like myself and Philip Sullivan have ever seen. They've never been published anywhere. I didn't publish them. I never said a word about the umbrella because I never thought it was, that big of a, piece of information.
But that corroborates a witness.
Yeah, but lo and behold, he says 28 years later, yeah, I think it was a brown umbrella. And you know what? If you're trying to make up a story and you say, well, yeah, she had an umbrella. Well, what did the umbrella look like? Oh, I don't know. It was red. It was blue. I mean, that's probably the only brown umbrella I've ever seen, And so that was another point that made me really scratch my head. And then I said, well, So you saw the umbrella. That's interesting. Well, I'll tell you what room was she in? Now, again, I've got in the handwritten notes that nobody outside of law enforcement and a few people like myself and Philip Sullivan and the original defense team have ever seen. Nobody's ever published it. Nobody's ever published the notes. Nobody's ever seen the notes. And but one key element before that, I had gone to the American Inn myself that day, and I took a panoramic picture of the front of the hotel. It's a roadside hotel that kind of makes an L shape. And he says he was in the L shape upper room, looking down where he could see the whole property. And I said, what room was she in? And he's from my picture, he said, see that van, 2 spaces to the left, the door right in front of it, which is room 103, which on Jack Burnett's handwritten notes identifies Imogene Thompson on the night of the murder being in room 103 of the American Inn. And I said to myself, oh, wow, she was there that night. And he was there that night. He saw her there. And so then to answer, who asked this question? William Hughes. To answer William's question, so I asked him, hey, why do you think Mrs. Thompson was at the hotel that night? And he said, well, she was trying to get away from her son with all that money. And then here's the other interesting note. The other person that's listed in the Jack Burnett's handwritten notes was in the room next to Imogene Thompson. He was a person traveling through. He wasn't from Beaufort. He was a traveling salesperson, and he happened to be staying at the hotel that night. And somebody in a big sedan pulled up in front of his room and started banging on the door and banging on the window saying, come on out of there, come on out of there, and broke his window, put a brick through his window. So the woman at the hotel moved him to another location. Whoever broke his window wasn't looking for him. Whoever broke his window was knocking on the wrong door. He was in room 104. The person they were looking for was most likely in room 103, trying to get away from her son with all that money. Now, how JP Morgan got involved in that, the other police officer, all I can tell you is that there has been testimony that Michael Thompson was JP Morgan's do boy, that, they were involved in drug trafficking. That's actually documented on both counts, that JP Morgan was in some ways involved in drug trafficking and Michael Thompson was in some ways involved in drug trafficking. So is that the connection? Not sure, but she was definitely at the American Inn that night. Tukey definitely saw her there. Tukey definitely followed the police officers when they left. Tukey definitely stood on the side of the road across the street from the Gwenco muffler shop and saw the muzzle flash, heard the gunshot, saw her fall to the ground and said, oh, shoot, and then escaped in the darkness. Now, I've got one other little detail, and there's not a whole lot of eyes on here, and I'm just going to share it because it's one of the things in the book that's kind of one of the kickers in the book. And there's absolutely no way that he could have planned this. He could have known this. It's just, he's either telling the truth or he isn't. And there's a lot of reasons to say that he's telling the truth. But he said, oh, shoot, when he saw the muzzle flash and heard the gunshot and saw her body drop. And he said, and y'all remember this from court, he goes, and they heard me. Mm-hmm. And they came running down to the road, flashing their lights across the street to try to find him as he disappeared in the darkness back down to his car. They were looking for him. Officer Rick, I think it's Rick Rosa or Rico Rosa or Rico Rosa, but he's an officer at GCPD, filed a police report that on the night in question, a couple on their way home to Beaufort saw two white males running at the Gwenco muffler shop around that time of night. Now, I'm sorry, Tukey couldn't have planted that.
Mm-hmm.
So his story is the most credible thing that's been told about this case.
Mm-hmm.
Hope that answers your question, William.
Yep. Yeah.
Any more questions?
We've got a question. Let me ask the question. We have one from last week that was, what is the biggest shocker from this investigation?
Well, really, that was it. What I just shared with you was it. I had largely written the book when Tukey first contacted me, and I had worked off of the state's theory. I had worked around the state's theory, and of course, there's a lot of information that already didn't hold up with the state's theory, but I was largely working from that body of evidence. And then I start talking to this guy that, says, hey, she was at the American Inn that night. And I followed the police and I started digging into that. And I mean, that was the most shocking thing. And then, he had told me the story that I just kind of told you guys in bits and pieces and increments, and he basically was always just adding more detail and adding more detail, telling me the story. And I mean, as it went along, I mean, I would test him on things like, well, what about this? And what about that? And I mean, he just knew things that there was no way for him to know other than he was telling the truth. Of course, as you all know, I actually also had him take a polygraph, and he passed the polygraph. But then the most shocking thing was, Billy and I had him come to Billy's office and tell us his whole story. This is when we're preparing to file the habeas, and he told us the whole story from start to finish. And it lined everything up for me that I'm like, oh my God, this piece fits, this piece fits. But the one thing he said, that she was shot one time, fell to the asphalt, and then he kind of disappeared in the darkness. And we know her car wasn't there at that time. They go back to the hotel, and then the person at the hotel describes one of the police officers coming inside the office and sitting down, to take a breath. And then going back out and leaving, and her car then leaves. And as the two experts testified, she was placed in the car post-mortem. So, she was shot outside the car and then placed in the car. And then, the evidence is that another shot was taken inside the car and then a third shot into the seat as part of the staging of the scene. But he had just told us his part of that story. And it occurred to me that, well, wait a minute, if she was laying on the asphalt in the rain, in the pouring rain, she's not going to have blood spatter on her. Her clothes are going to be blood soaked.
Yes.
And I kind of said that to Billy, and he said, well, I don't know that that's admissible because that's already really been adjudicated, but maybe as it, corroborates Tukey, maybe we could get it in that way. But let's take a look at the pictures. And he pulls out the crime scene pictures, and he just and his eyes got big, and like they said, I could see the whites of his eyes. His eyes got big and the color drained out of his face, and he just started dropping the pictures in front of me. And her clothes are blood soaked. She clearly laid in the rain bleeding it's not spatter from 2 gunshots at close contact inside a dry vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, that became the most shocking moment. And what was shocking about it was not just that the truth had finally kind of worked its way to the surface. It's that the people that prosecuted Michael Chappell had to see this. If I could figure it out,
Mm-hmm.
if I could figure it out, some old crusty contractor, that these hairy-chested crime fighters should have figured this out 33 years ago.
Well, here's the thing, though, Henry. We didn't have all of the evidence back then.
Tammy, these are the crime scene photos taken in 1993. And
you also had people that were stacking everything against him. That was the biggest thing for me.
I am not.
I've never seen corruption like I have seen. That was the biggest thing for me, because I never thought in a million years that your people would do this to you. I mean, I was that naive, to be honest with you. I was that naive. So that just blew me away every time you would throw more stuff out there and say, well, so-and-so did this and so-and-so did that. And learning that even when JP Morgan had committed suicide, how the top brass came in and even wiped his computer clean, and all of these things to hide evidence. And then even as far as through this case, right up until the very end, how the state was like, oh, but let me slide this paper in there and see how we can, throw everybody for a loop at the end with, we don't really trust Tukey and he's crazy.
Well, and I want to say this on behalf of my friend Jermaine Rogers, who we affectionately refer to as Tukey. Jermaine Rogers is sitting in prison right now today,
yes.
And it is 100% my belief that he is sitting there because he testified in this case.
Absolutely.
And I want to share this with you guys. You'll remember when he testified on March 18th, 2025, when he said, the actual factuals and all of that. That was the very day that they initiated parole revocation against him. And they initiated that parole revocation for what they call administrative violations. There's no new charges against him. He hasn't gone out and violated his parole. He hasn't gone out and committed any crimes.
He didn't show up for his parole meeting.
Yeah, he didn't show up for his parole.
Because he was in court.
Because he was under subpoena in Judge Karp's courtroom testifying in the Michael Chappell case. And he's in jail because of it. And that information has been put in front of Judge Karp. So I'm optimistic that Judge Karp is going to see through that, and hopefully he will do something about it. But the fact of the matter is that this man who came forward with nothing to gain, who said to me, and I literally asked him at one point, well, what made you come forward? What made you reach out to me? And he said, you know what? Mike was a cop, and as they kind of say on the streets, Mike was on some BS. Mike was on some because he's a cop. But no man deserves to spend 33 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. And Tukey said to me, and I know they set him up because I saw who did it.
Yeah.
And so, good on him. Good on him as having the humanity to come forward to help his fellow man, and shame on the state for putting him back in prison for it.
Amen. So we got another question.
There's another one from William there.
Yeah. If the case is dismissed without prejudice, do you opine that Mike will be released or held pending a new trial?
So yeah, if it's dismissed without, if it's the verdict is vacated without prejudice, then my opinion is that the judge would likely bond Mike out, probably on on reconnaissance bond or what have you. He probably would have to wear an ankle monitor while Gwinnett County made the decision whether or not they were going to retry him. I could tell you my opinion on that is that I don't believe that would happen. I don't believe they could make anywhere near a credible case. And so I don't think that's going to happen. But being honest with you, I think that's the most likely outcome because I think that's the safest ruling for the judge. If the judge rules with prejudice, that completely exonerates Mike and he would be free to go that day. And I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that the judge is going to do that because I think the judge has seen, that there is credible evidence here. And he said, if Jermaine Rogers' story is credible, then there certainly was a Brady violation. And that's why he allowed the case to move forward because he wanted to hear from the experts. He wanted to hear the rest of the evidence, and he's heard it. And Billy did a great job in his final brief and in his final proposed order to put all the facts in front of the judge. And, you can't unsee that. You can't, when the judge reads it, I think he's a fair-minded human being. And I think just like Tukey, he's going to say, you know what, 33 years is a long time to spend in prison for something you didn't do. And so I think I think Mike's coming home soon. I think I made that point clear not too long ago. And yes. That's what I believe.
Praying it so. And, this kind of ties in, David asking what made the new DA of Gwinnett County want to revisit the Chapel case and wasn't it part of her campaign? I don't think it was revisiting the Chapel case. It was. Well,
it was part of her campaign that she was going to look into the wrongful conviction.
Wrongful conviction.
Her predecessor.
Yes.
And she acknowledged that her predecessor was likely to have wrongfully convicted some folks. Mm-hmm. And we made a very strong case to her, and she agreed to have the Convictions Integrity Unit look at the case. If you had been around back then, David, we had a program or a campaign, if you will, called Call Right Scream.
Yes.
Where we literally sent thousands of emails and thousands of letters. Thousands of phone calls into the DA's office to say, hey, you need to look at this case. And I don't know if I've ever really shared this publicly, but the DA actually reached out to one of my civil attorneys that has a connection in the DA's office and basically said, Uncle, please stop. And, and said that, we're going to look at the case. And they ultimately did. And then they ultimately kind of closed it out and didn't do anything with it. So she really disappointed us. And I personally don't believe she's lived up to her campaign promises. I think she's been very politically expedient. And I don't think she saw enough value in the Michael Chappell case for her, political career. And she probably thought, well, if this guy does get exonerated, I'm going to have thousands of other cases that I'm going to have to look at because everybody's going to line up wanting to go to the courthouse to say, well, if Danny Porter wrongfully convicted Michael Chappell, look at my case. And she's right about that. It is kind of Pandora's box. If and when Mike is exonerated, there's going to be a lot of other cases that people.
But to me, that's like your head is screwed on wrong because if you can get a case turned over because your predecessor did all of this corruption and you can prove it, you can make sure it happens. What does that do to boost you?
I agree. I thought she was going to be a hero. I thought she would be the hero, and I thought it. Myself, I thought it would be great for her political career, but she apparently didn't see it that way. But the other point that I was making is valid. If and when Mike is exonerated, her office is going to be inundated with other cases, and I think that might have had a lot to do with it. But I can't speak for her, and I'm not trying to cast any shade on her. They did take up the case as they said they would, but then they really didn't do anything with it. So that was disappointing. And I, I guess obviously I have my opinion about that, but that's all I got to say about that.
It's because the Chapel Warriors are the only true ones that have been able to hang in there. That's it.
Well, yeah.
Our Chapel Warrior team, everybody, all inclusive, who's in that. The ones that hang in
I want you to hit the next one from William because I want to address that.
Okay.
Yes, that is our next project. 100%. I talked to him.
Out.
Huh?
I said, get Tukey out of there.
Yes, I talked to him this weekend. He calls me every couple days, and he's in as good a spirits as he can be in. And I have told him personally, I'm not going to forget you. We've got to get this. We've got to get this done, and hopefully we'll have the outcome that is going to cast a lot of light on this situation. Mm-hmm. And when it does, you're next. We're coming for you. So yes, to answer your question, freeing Tukey is our next project.
Well, I'd like to say that I had the pleasure of meeting him as well the night we did the live in the Land of the Lies. He came out that night kind of incognito a little bit, and I got to meet him. And he's a really nice guy. He and his son, yep. And really, really nice guy. People just assume because you have a past that you're not approachable. That's still cast on you. But good grief, we all have one. We all have one.
And it was over 30 years ago. And mm-hmm. and you know what? Whatever his crimes were back then, he's paid his debt to society. And mm-hmm. They saw fit to let him out, and he was not doing anything. And in fact, part of the story, which is you guys will hear about it a lot when this next project kicks off, but he helped Gwinnett County with another situation just a few months before this, and he was worried that they were going to revoke his parole, and his parole officer literally told an attorney that passed on the message to me and to him that as long as he wasn't committing any new crimes, as long as he was keeping his nose clean, she was not worried about the administrative violations, and he had nothing to worry about. Mm-hmm. Then he testified on Michael Chappell's behalf in Judge Karp's courtroom, and that very day mm-hmm. they initiated revocation proceedings based on the administrative violations that she had said 3 months earlier weren't a problem. So he is in jail. He is in prison because he told the truth and because he reached out to help Michael Chappell. So yes, William, thank you for asking that question, and please stick around and please be part of that fight. But he is our next project. Absolutely.
All righty. Well, I've got a question for you. Hey, Henry, have you lost some weight?
I wouldn't say lost. I wouldn't say lost.
Over here.
Yeah, I wouldn't say lost. I've misplaced about 80 pounds, and I'm not looking for it. So,
yay, Henry!
Hopefully, it's not coming back. So,
well, I've collected some of it.
No, we can't tell that. You got your do back. You've got your cool haircut. So looking good. So I have a question for you since you're asking me questions.
Yes.
So today, Tammy narrowly potentially escaped her 9th surgery in 3 years. So my question is our project after Tukey going to be raising money to buy you a lifetime supply of bubble wrap?
if my son heard that, he would say yes. Last year for Halloween, he actually wrapped me up in bubble wrap. That's what I was, and my husband was
Great minds think alike.
Dr. Feelgood. Yes.
Yeah.
But
So
yes, my shoulder, I was just coming out of surgery from May 20th, and it was supposed to be good to go to physical therapy. And I said, no, there's something wrong. Had an MRI, and it shows a full thickness tear, and after surgery. And so I'm eight weeks now, and I said, we're going to have to wait this out. But I could not raise my arm at all last week. I couldn't do anything with it. And I just said, I'm going to have to start praying the Lord will do a miracle. I laid hands on myself. I have my sister and other people, and just praying for a miracle. And of course, I've got to be cautious with it. And my doctor said we're going to wait a month and kind of see where we are before we just jump into another surgery. But do y'all see, I'm raising a hallelujah, because God is a miracle worker, and I'm claiming it. So if y'all pray with me, and pray to Jesus. That's the only God I serve. Amen.
good job, Tammy. Well, thank you everybody for your great questions.
Hold on. One more question. What is an update on the podcast?
Oh, yes. Thank you. So, our podcasting partner, a lot of you guys will remember Matt Duff, who did the Ivan Cantu case, Cousins by Blood. We had him on for a Q&A. The fellow down in Texas who many believe was an innocent man that Texas executed, I think last year or the year before. In any event, he's done that podcast, Cousins by Blood, and also another podcast called Who Killed Beth Ellen. Both great podcasts. He is a fantastic producer and editor. He actually has television experience as well. And he and I just started talking, over the Ivan Cantu case. Laura Griffin Finney actually made that connection and kind of put us together, and many moons ago. But it just turned out to be a good fit for he and I to work together. Most of you guys don't know her personally, but she was at the live event. My good friend Joy Burney is actually our host. She's been in the entertainment space for a number of years, and her and my wife were like best friends from childhood. And so the three of us have kind of collaborated on Thin Blue Crime. And I said all that to say Matt was coming back from the beach today, and we are trying to wrap up the third episode and start working on the fourth. And our hope was to have at least 4 or 5 episodes in the can by the end of July, and then we would start dropping episodes probably last week of July or first week of August. And then it will just be a weekly episode every week. And so we're on track for that. We still got a lot to do, but we're trying to get it done. And the other thing that since you didn't ask, but it's kind of related, Killing Henry has been completed. I've actually talked everything through with the printers. They're kind of ready to go on a moment's notice. I've made my prediction of when I think the ruling is going to happen. And since that was one of the questions, I'm just going to tell you my prediction was actually this Thursday, the 24th. And like you said, I'm going to speak that into existence.
Yeah, I was like, where'd that come from?
Yeah, well, I made it up, but
okay. And so, what time? Like you're picking the baby when the
I
baby's
didn't pick a time.
Okay,
I picked an outcome. I picked an outcome, and I picked a day, and that day is Thursday, and the outcome is not negative. Anybody on this site would be happy with the outcome that I predicted, and so if it happens this Thursday, all I got to do is hit send. If it happens a day or two later or a week or so later, I might have to change the date on the last page, but we'll cross that bridge, and it won't take but a second, and then I will hit send, and Killing Henry will be on its way. So thank you, everybody, for your support. Thank you for supporting the Michael Chappell is Innocent project. Thank you for keeping Mike and the Michael Chappell is Innocent project in your prayers. And as Tammy said, let's speak it into existence. Thursday, July 24th, petition granted. Let's go.
Amen. Let's pray it so. See you guys. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Free Mike Chappell. Quit it. Look, I'm the queen. I'm the queen for the
Queen
day.
Tammy. Bye, everyone.